Welcome, team. And we are going to be diving into a modern man's relationship with alcohol in this video. I'm going to be talking about what drives it, where does alcohol sit in your psyche or in your unconscious, and then one step you can do to start to change your relationship with alcohol without relying on willpower or without completely restricting the thing altogether. The most successful guys I work with, guys who are what I call modern men, but they have some sort of a good career, they're making great money, maybe a deposit ready for a house. Um, they're in a pretty stable place. Yet one of the things that they struggle with is the handle on alcohol. And this may show up like they are going very well, they're on track with their goals, and then alcohol completely derails them, or they just can't go out for one or two drinks without it turning into an absolute bender. And a lot of these guys have done the likes of dry January, or they've gotten into the gym, or they've just completely removed themselves from friend groups. And it does work for a while until it doesn't, until something happens where maybe it's a friend that comes into town, or maybe it is a rough day at work or conflict with a partner, and alcohol becomes the compensatory mechanism for what's actually happening underneath. Before we get into this video, feel free to download a copy of my book, Unbound, A Man's Guide to Breaking Destructive Patterns, Reclaiming His Inner Authority, and Living Life on His Own Terms. It's completely free and it's in the link below. What I find very interesting is that like almost all of them would turn around and after a night out, they feel some level of guilt, or they feel some level of anxiousness, or like, what have I have to do? It's not like they have done some negative behavior. It's just that what is it about alcohol that they can't seem to get a handle on? So first thing we have to do is look at this on a psychological level. Where does the relationship with alcohol sit within your psyche? Take me, for example, and now this is an extreme case, but the mechanism, it makes this mechanism visible. My earliest childhood memories of, say, my dad growing up would have been in the pub, or it would have been him drunk, or it would have been him coming home and getting sick, getting to a point where he wasn't actually able to stand. So before I'd ever taken a sip of alcohol myself, well, then drinking wasn't just going out for one or two. Drinking was going out and getting wasted. About the time I was 12, I had actually started drinking. I had started drinking bottles of vodka before I was going to a disco. And even though I wasn't drinking daily, I was drinking, lo and behold, to get drunk. There was so many times I was getting carried home, I'd be getting sick of my mother, and that grew up with me. When I went to college, I would definitely go out and aim to get absolutely fucked up. Now, even if your father wasn't to that extreme, those weren't the earliest childhood memories. Remember, I was just using that to make this mechanism visible. The internal standard towards alcohol, your relationship towards alcohol within your psyche, starts to develop well before you drink a drink yourself. And from an Irish perspective, drinking is a behavior which is considered socially acceptable. It's considered acceptable for a man. And a lot of modern men, they come from a background where alcohol starts at a young age. And that's the age where you are starting to develop a start of like, you're figuring out what it means to be a man for you. And you're starting to look at like model other people around you. It's at an age where a young man is still figuring out who he is, who it is, what it is for him to be a man, separate from his parents, separate from like the lads, separate from the version of himself that it has been expected of him. It's really the age where identity gets built. And so when drink shows up in that in any form or capacity whatsoever, when drink is shown as the acceptable thing to do, it doesn't just become a habit. It becomes a part of who he is. It's tied to his belonging, and it's tied to him becoming a man. It's, again, like I said, the acceptable thing for him to do. Now, for some of you watching this, you may not have any father at all, and that is its own version of the same problem, because if there's no man there to set the internal standard, if there's no development of any father complex at all within your psyche, well, then there is a lack of what I call inner authority. And a man without inner authority, without a healthy father complex that has been developed, becomes more susceptible to whatever's going on in his environment. There's nothing there to say, no, I am not taking this on. And there's also research that backs this. Like, children without a father are at greater risk for developing a substance abuse. Almost 75% of patients that are in substance abuse centers, adolescent patients, come from fatherless backgrounds. So that's the first thing, understanding what is the relationship to alcohol in terms of like how it was formed into your psyche and became consciously acceptable. This is not to say that you're never to drink ever again or alcohol is a bad thing. It's just that when a behavior is allowed in our conscious, whatever is suppressed in our unconscious, it will use that behavior to almost release it. And that's where the second part of this comes in, is what is alcohol compensating for? And the interesting thing about the male psyche, or the psyche in general, is that the unconscious is always trying to balance out the conscious. And I'll get deeper into that in a different video. But whatever the modern man isn't processing, naming, or directing, maybe that is anger, maybe that is shame, maybe it's sadness, maybe it's just he's not getting his needs met. This could be from years, or it could be in his everyday life towards his relationships, or maybe in his work, or whatever that could be. The unconscious is going to find a channel for it to process, or for it to push this thing into its conscious. As we've established, the modern man's conscious world treats drinking as something acceptable, but it may not treat, say, dealing with anger as something acceptable. So what it will do is it will use the thing that is acceptable in his psyche as the mechanism for him to process it. Often you could see a guy who's a really calm, really gentle guy, has a couple of drinks, goes absolutely off the rails, because his unconscious is then using this mechanism to process and deal with what he's consciously not accepting. And what I found with modern men who have an underdeveloped father complex, alcohol becomes the main way for him to metabolize emotions that he was never taught to direct, whether that be anger from a boundary that was crossed, whether that be shame from a past behavior, whether that be sting from a rejection from his partner or from his boss, or maybe he got looked over for a position, or maybe it's sadness from wounds that he's been carrying for years and he doesn't even realize it. I dive deeper into this in my book Unbound, which you can click the link below and download. It's completely free. But essentially, one of the primary roles of the father, and what happens when a young man develops a healthy father complex, is that he is able to direct his emotions in what's known as a healthy masculine manner. And when I talk about masculine and feminine, they're not the man, the woman, it's the principles of what they mean within a man's psyche. The masculine principle, which we develop from our father, from the modeling of the father, or develop from developing our own healthy father complex within our psyche, that is about direction, structure, action, containment, and all these other things. So when the boy develops a healthy father complex within his psyche, well, then he's able to take whatever arises within him and channel it outward with shape and intention, instead of it leaking sideways, or instead of it compounding underneath. Without that teaching, the man arrives into adulthood with all this unconscious material that's just sitting inside him, and he's no idea to direct it outward. He doesn't even know it exists. And alcohol becomes the pressure valve in which he can then use to release this material. It's very important to point out here is what I've noticed is that the more that's within him, the more of that energy or that unconscious material that he has within his psyche, the bigger the compulsion is, or the bigger the release from the valve. Now, the inverse of this is when a man starts to develop a healthy father complex, the emotions or the unconscious material that's inside him that's waiting to come out, it still arises, but it's able to direct it in a healthy manner, in an informed. He's not letting it compound underneath and leak into other areas of his life. It's not released through that compulsion of having another pint or wanting to go for a drink after a hard day's work. This is why I also believe that external solutions to drinking eventually collapse. Dry January, using willpower, just completely removing yourself from friend groups, because none of this addresses the complex underneath it. It just suppresses the surface. And when you suppress anything within your psyche, without giving it anywhere to go, it just overcompensates somewhere else. Unconscious material is always going to arise. It's always going to be sent through to your conscious to deal with. And when it's not being addressed, it's just been told to wait. And that stems the compulsion. Inner authority, on the other hand, or a healthy father complex that comes online, it is able to take the energy or the unconscious material and use it in a structured manner. If you think of like a massive river of water that's flowing downstream, inner authority is like the banks that are going to dive in deep and direct that water to where it needs to go, whether that be to the ocean or whether that to be the village, to feed the villagers, whatever that may be. And the downstream effects of this show up everywhere. Because I'm able to deal with the unconscious material that comes up with, say, my partner could trigger me or something like that, I'm able to direct that. And that could be setting a firm and healthy boundary with your partner, or could be just taking the lead in a certain situation. And because of that, relationships deepen. Or he starts to step up in meetings. He starts to assert himself, starts to say, no, this is the way I want to take it. This is what I want to do with it. And obviously that benefits him in the long run in terms of his career. Even his ability to enter and engage in environments where alcohol is around the place. He's not pressured by it whatsoever. I've had clients who are able to now enter and drink sensibly. It's not like I've told them to cut off drink altogether. They do enjoy a drink every now and then, but the relationship has completely changed towards it. And this is what happens when we start to address external issues at the psychological root. Now, where to start? So if you're a modern man and you're recognizing that I have this compulsive or impulsive behavior around alcohol, you're recognizing that you may not have a healthy relationship to it, you find it hard to manage or get some form of handle on it, then the first thing to understand is, where does alcohol sit in your unconscious? What is the relationship I have with it on an unconscious level? And this isn't how many drinks you drink. This isn't how many times you go out. It's just trigger points. Where is it that I have this need to go and drink? Like some of the stems or the voices that, say, my clients have heard is like, oh, I'd love a pint right now. Tough day after work. Just go for 1 or 2 points to blow off steam. That language, even, I'm using this to blow off steam, that is a direct indicator that I am consciously not accepting the unconscious material that's inside of me. Instead, I'm going to use this mechanism to compensate what I should be dealing with inside me. Also, notice when you're using alcohol as a voice or crutch to enter situations. So this could be having a heart-to-heart with your partner to develop some level of vulnerability. Well, then I'm using this mechanism to deal and get into a state in which I have not found it comfortable consciously to do it myself. Do you need it to network or socialize, or to like loosen up in a room? And the big one as well, and this was one a lot of modern men miss, is that, like, am I justifying my behavior to have alcohol? I've taken a couple of months off. I've done my whole dry January thing. You know, I've been a quote unquote good boy, and I'm going to celebrate and reward myself by using the mechanism in which I'm looking to compensate with. These are the data points we're looking for. So what is alcohol actually doing for me? What am I using it for? What's my relationship for? What am I using alcohol to compensate with? And from there, we can actually sit and work with the unconscious material our psyche is trying to get us to look at in the first place.